Chapter 1. Frequency Illusion. Have you ever come across a new word, a car model, or even a strange symbol, and then suddenly it seems like the entire world is echoing it back to you? You hear that word everywhere. You see that car in every parking lot. That symbol starts popping up on random signs and posts. No, the universe isn't whispering secrets to you. You're not waking up to some hidden pattern. What's really happening is far more deceptive, and it lives inside your own mind. This is what psychologists call the frequency illusion, also known as the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. It's not magic. It's a mental glitch. Once you become aware of something for the first time, your brain latches onto it. You start noticing it over and over again, as if it suddenly multiplied itself across your entire reality. But it didn't. The thing you're noticing was probably always there. You just weren't tuned in. This illusion is fueled by two powerful cognitive forces. The first is selective attention. That's the brain's way of narrowing its focus to avoid being overwhelmed. We're surrounded by millions of stimuli every second: colors, words, sounds, smells. It's chaos. So your brain decides what's relevant and what isn't. The second you learn something new, like a certain song lyric or a psychological concept, your brain elevates it in the mental hierarchy. Suddenly, it becomes important. And anything labeled important gets flagged every time it appears in your environment. Then comes confirmation bias. Your mind starts looking for evidence that supports what you've already noticed, and it quietly ignores what doesn't fit the narrative. You spot the thing once, and then you start seeing it everywhere. Not because it's more common, but because your attention is hunting for it. And every time you find it again, your brain whispers, "See, it's happening again." That whisper becomes a belief. That belief becomes a story. And that story becomes your reality. It's like tuning into a frequency that's been broadcasting all along. You just weren't listening. Until now. And in today's digital world, this illusion is amplified like never before. You search for something once, let's say eco-friendly products, and suddenly your entire feed is filled with green brands, zero waste influencers, and sustainability ads. That's not random. That's algorithmic reinforcement. Your brain's illusion is being backed up by machine learning. The tech doesn't know truth. It only knows attention. Whatever you focus on, it reflects back to you. This is where it gets dangerous. Imagine the same pattern, but now apply it to politics, fear, or conspiracy. You watch one controversial video. Your algorithm reacts. More videos flood in. You start seeing patterns that match your bias. You begin believing that everyone around you is thinking the same, but they're not. Your world has become a filtered echo chamber. The frequency illusion can warp your perception so deeply that you begin mistaking pattern for truth. A coincidence starts to feel like a message. A repeated image feels like a warning. You start connecting dots that were never meant to be connected. And once you fall into that loop, the illusion feeds itself. But here's the darkest part. This glitch isn't just a flaw in your thinking. It might be the very foundation of how you interpret reality. Because if what you pay attention to shapes what you experience, then what exactly is reality made of? Is it objective, or is it personal? Subjective? Constructed entirely inside your own head. The Stoics once said we don't suffer from events, we suffer from our perception of those events. And in a way, the frequency illusion is proof of that. It shows us how fragile our perception really is. If our mind can so easily be tricked into believing something is everywhere, then what else have we misunderstood? What else have we been blind to simply because we never knew to look? The truth is, your brain is constantly curating your version of the world. What you think is real might just be what you've recently noticed. What you think is meaningful might just be what your mind has decided to highlight. You are not seeing the whole picture. You're seeing the filtered version, custom built by your own psychology. So the next time something starts appearing everywhere all at once, take a moment. Breathe. Ask yourself, did the world really change? Or did you? Because in the end, you don't see things as they are. You see them as you are. Chapter 2. Temporal Illusion. Time feels like the one constant in life. It ticks forward, second by second, minute by minute, always moving, always linear. But the truth? Time isn't as stable as it feels. In fact, it bends, stretches, and warps right inside your mind. What you think of as time is often just a story your brain is telling to make sense of reality. And that story, it's full of lies. This is the temporal illusion, a psychological phenomenon where your perception of time doesn't match the clock. Sometimes hours feel like minutes. Sometimes a single moment stretches out forever. We've all felt it. Waiting in line when you're bored can feel like an eternity. But spend the same amount of time doing something thrilling and it vanishes in a blink. The seconds are identical. Your experience is not. Your brain doesn't experience time directly. It processes events and then creates the feeling of time passing. That feeling is incredibly sensitive to attention, emotion, and memory. The more stimulation or emotional weight something carries, the longer it feels. That's why childhood summers seem to go on forever in your memories. Your young brain was constantly encountering new experiences. Novelty stretches time. Repetition collapses it. As you get older, your life becomes more predictable. Days blur together. Routine kicks in. And with fewer novel experiences, your brain logs less data, fewer memories, a shorter feeling timeline. It's not that life is literally moving faster. It's that your mind is compressing it, like a file too familiar to keep unzipping. The illusion gets even weirder when you factor in trauma or danger. In high-stress situations, like near accidents or life-threatening moments, people often report that time slowed down. The mind goes into overdrive, recording everything in hyper detail, ramping up awareness. It's a survival feature. Your brain starts stacking memories so fast, it feels like time is crawling. But again, time didn't slow down. You sped up. And yet, time can also disappear when you fall into what psychologists call flow state. When you're completely immersed in an activity playing music, writing, gaming, you lose track of time entirely. Hours can go missing, and it feels like you just blinked. That's the other side of the illusion. The brain is so focused, so satisfied, it stops bothering to track time. It's not relevant anymore. Even your memory messes with time. Think about a long vacation. While you're on it, time might fly by. But later, when you recall it, it feels long and rich with detail. That's called the retrospective time illusion. The more memories you make, the longer the experience feels in hindsight. So the past isn't even fixed. It stretches and shrinks depending on how you remember it. Here's the unsettling truth. The only reason you feel like time exists is because your brain is generating that sensation. It's a construct like a mental theater projection running in the background. Without that illusion, reality would feel like a chaotic flood of meaningless moments. Time is your brain's editing software. But just like a film, it can be slowed down, sped up, or chopped into pieces, all depending on how you experience it. So what happens when you start questioning time itself? What happens when you realize your worst days feel longer than your best, even though the hours are identical? What happens when you understand that boredom isn't about waiting, it's about attention? That suffering often stretches time because your brain is hyper-aware, and joy shortens it because you're too present to notice it slipping away. It makes you wonder how much of your life is actually real and how much is just distorted perception wrapped in the illusion of minutes and hours. We chase time. We race against it. We fear it running out. But maybe what we're afraid of isn't time itself. Maybe we're afraid of being stuck in moments that feel long, even when they're short, or losing moments that felt short, even though they were everything. In the end, time doesn't just tick away in the background. It lives in your memories, your emotions, your focus. It's not the same for everyone. It's not even the same for you, day to day. So the next time time feels strange, too fast, too slow, or completely lost, Don't blame the clock. Blame the mind. Because time isn't what you think, it's what you feel. Chapter 3. The Black Swan Theory. Imagine a world where everything makes sense until suddenly it doesn't. A world where one event, totally unexpected, completely rewrites everything you thought you knew. That's the terror and the elegance of the Black Swan Theory. For centuries, people believed all swans were white. It wasn't just an assumption, it was a fact. No one had ever seen a swan of any other color. And then, one day, explorers reached Western Australia and found black swans. Not just one, flocks. That single moment shattered an age-old certainty, and it became a metaphor for the kind of events that changed the course of history. The Black Swan Theory, introduced by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, is all about rare, unpredictable events that carry massive consequences. They're outliers, things no one sees coming, but in hindsight, everyone tries to explain. These aren't just statistical accidents, they're paradigm shifts. Think about 9/11, the COVID-19 pandemic, the 2008 financial crash, the rise of the internet. Nobody saw them coming in the way they actually arrived. But once they happened, people scrambled to fit them into a narrative like they were inevitable, as if the signs were always there. But they weren't, not clearly. That's the dangerous illusion. We think we understand the past, so we believe we can predict the future. But we can't. That's what makes black swans so terrifying. They don't follow rules, they defy patterns, and yet they change everything. A black swan doesn't just shake the system, it rewrites the rules entirely. Humans are wired to seek patterns. We crave order. Predictability feels safe. So we build models, forecasts, assumptions based on what's already happened. But the problem is, we don't know what we don't know. And the biggest risks, the most profound events, often come from outside the frame we're watching. This is where the illusion of control creeps in. We believe we're prepared because we've seen so much. We have data, simulations, graphs. But all that data is built from the past. Black swans don't live in the past. They're born in the blind spots, those dark corners we refuse to look at. Because we think they don't matter. The financial world is especially vulnerable to this illusion. Traders think they've priced in every risk until something crashes the market overnight. Entire empires have been built on projections, only to collapse when a single, unthinkable event turns up. One war, one virus, one spark. But black swans aren't just about global catastrophes. They can be deeply personal. The day you lose someone unexpectedly, the phone call that changes your future, that one person who enters your life out of nowhere and alters your path forever. These are your personal black swans, impossible to anticipate, yet impossible to ignore. So what do you do with this idea? Do you fear it? Try to plan for the unplannable? Or do you embrace it? That's where Taleb's theory takes a darker but wiser turn. He argues for something called anti-fragility. Not just resilience, because resilience means you bounce back. Anti-fragility means you grow stronger from chaos. You don't need to predict every black swan. You just need to build a life that can survive them, and maybe even thrive because of them. That means staying humble, expecting the unexpected, and never getting too comfortable with certainty. Because the moment you think you figured it all out, that's when the black swan lands. And when it does, it won't knock politely. It'll crash through the window, tear down the walls, and leave you staring at a version of reality you never saw coming. That's the uncomfortable truth. No matter how careful, smart, or advanced we become, we are still vulnerable to randomness, to chaos, to the unknown. And sometimes, the biggest events in your life, the things that define you, will be the ones you never planned for. So don't cling too tightly to what you think is certain. Stay curious, stay alert, leave room for the impossible. Because somewhere out there, in the shadows of probability, another black swan is waiting. Not if, but when. Chapter 4. Toxoplasma of Rage. Deep beneath the surface of your mind, something stirs. Not quite emotion, not quite logic. Something darker, more primal. A whisper in your thoughts, a shadow in your decisions. Now imagine that this shadow wasn't yours at all, but something implanted, something ancient, something parasitic. Welcome to the Toxoplasma of Rage. Toxoplasma gondii is a real parasite. Tiny, microscopic, yet disturbingly powerful. It's been studied mostly in rodents and cats. Here's how it works. The parasite infects a mouse, gets into its brain, and then rewires. You said 3. The Black Swan Theory. ChatGPT said, here is your full 700-word immersive script for Chapter 3. The Black Swan Theory, tailored for your dark psyche channel. Cinematic, thought-provoking, and without subheadings. Chapter 3. The Black Swan Theory. There are moments when history splits, when one unexpected event sends ripples through everything we thought we knew, breaking our predictions, bending our logic, and forcing us to rewrite the rules. That's the power of a black swan. For centuries, people believed all swans were white. It wasn't a theory, it was a certainty. No one had seen otherwise. Then, in 1697, explorers in Western Australia stumbled upon something that shattered that belief. Black swans. In that instant, centuries of certainty collapsed. And from that collapse, a metaphor was born. The black swan theory, introduced by scholar and former trader Nassim Nicholas Taleb, is about rare and unpredictable events that carry massive consequences. Things that lie completely outside the realm of regular expectations until they happen. And then, suddenly, we pretend they were obvious all along. These events are statistical ghosts. Unpredictable, devastating, yet somehow always explained in hindsight. That's the illusion. They feel predictable only after they've wrecked everything. Think of the 9/11 attacks. Nobody in power expected commercial planes would be used like weapons. Think of the 2008 financial crisis. Experts with billion-dollar models didn't see it coming. Or the COVID-19 pandemic. Warnings existed, sure. But no one truly believed it would shut down the world. Until it did. These were black swans events that changed history, shocked systems, and exposed the fragility of what we call normal. But here's the twist. We're not just blindsided by black swans. We create the perfect conditions for them. The more we optimize, the more we assume control, the more tightly we build our systems, the more fragile we become, because we plan for what we've seen before. And black swans don't come from the past. They come from the blind spots. Our psychology plays a cruel trick on us. We're wired to seek patterns, to make predictions, to feel in control. We believe the future will resemble the past because that's comforting. It makes the world feel stable. But that belief is an illusion. It's like walking on ice that seems solid until it suddenly gives way. The financial world is a graveyard of this kind of arrogance. Investment banks built entire empires on historical data. Complex risk models, simulations, and forecasts, all obliterated by a single unexpected event. The models didn't break. Reality just didn't care. But it's not just economics. Black swans appear in our personal lives too. The day your relationship ends without warning. The one phone call that changes everything. The stranger you meet who shifts your destiny. These aren't just anomalies. They're the rule behind the curtain. The silent proof that no matter how much we plan, we're still dancing with the unknown. Taleb doesn't argue that we should predict black swans. In fact, he says that's impossible. What he does argue is that we should build systems that don't collapse when they hit one. He calls it anti-fragility. The idea that instead of breaking from chaos, we grow stronger because of it. Like muscles under pressure, like calluses from pain. It means leaving space for error. Accepting that randomness exists. Designing your life, your business, your mind, in a way that doesn't just survive shocks, but learns from them, and maybe even welcomes them. Most people resist this truth because it's uncomfortable. It strips away the fantasy of certainty. It demands humility. But once you see the world through this lens, you realize that the greatest danger isn't the black swan itself. It's thinking it can't happen. That's when it strikes. A black swan doesn't knock. It crashes in. It tears down your frameworks, mocks your predictions, and exposes the lie that you were ever in control. And yet, it's not just destruction. It's also transformation. From the ashes of certainty, something raw and real can emerge. Something freer. So ask yourself, What are you assuming will always stay the same? What truths are you clinging to that feel invincible? Because history is full of people who made the same mistake, and the next black swan is already on its way. You won't see it coming, but you'll feel it. Chapter 5. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. There's something strange about confidence. The less someone knows, the more certain they seem. They speak louder, argue harder, and believe in their own brilliance without ever seeing the gaps. It's not arrogance, it's blindness. Welcome to the Dunning-Kruger Effect. This psychological illusion is simple, but its consequences are devastating. It tells us that the people who know the least about a subject often overestimate their knowledge the most. And the ones who know the most, they doubt themselves. They hesitate. They're aware of just how much they still don't know. The irony cuts deep. Stupidity is loud. Intelligence is quiet. Back in 1999, two psychologists, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, ran a series of experiments. What they found was disturbing. Participants who performed the worst on tests of logic, grammar, and humor consistently believed they had done better than average. They weren't trying to lie. They genuinely couldn't recognize their own incompetence. Their lack of skill masked their ability to detect it. Think about that. The brain can be so under-equipped that it can't even realize it's wrong. It's like a blind man arguing about colors and believing he's winning. Now scale that illusion to the world stage. Social media platforms filled with people convinced they know everything about medicine, politics, psychology, climate change, because they saw a video, read a post, or heard someone loud enough to sound smart. The Dunning-Kruger effect is no longer a quirky psychological quirk. It's a social virus, and it spreads fast. But here's where the dark psyche opens wider. This effect doesn't just explain annoying internet debates. It explains why dangerous people rise to power. It explains why conspiracy theories explode. It explains how incompetence, when paired with confidence, can reshape reality. You see it in boardrooms, in governments, in classrooms. Chapter 6. The Observer Effect. What if reality isn't something we simply see, but something we change just by looking at it? That's the haunting premise behind the Observer Effect. At first glance, it sounds like quantum mysticism, but the truth runs deeper into physics, psychology, and the way consciousness interacts with the world. The observer effect comes from quantum mechanics, where particles behave differently when they're being observed. Electrons pass through two slits like waves until we measure them. Then they collapse, choosing a single path. The act of watching rewrites what's real, not metaphorically, literally. In the quantum realm, observation and existence are tangled together in a dance we still don't fully understand. But this idea isn't locked in a lab or buried in equations. It bleeds into everyday life. Think about security cameras. When you know you're being watched, you behave differently. When you're in public, when someone's listening, when a mirror reflects your own eyes, you're changed. Your choices shift. You filter yourself. You adjust. You become the version of you that fits the gaze. Now flip it. When you're alone, truly alone, your mind drifts to deeper places. You act differently. You reveal more of yourself to the silence. The observer effect is there, too, not just in science, but in how we live. The terrifying question, who's watching you now? And more importantly, who are you when no one is? In psychology, this translates to the Hawthorne effect. People perform better, work harder, behave differently when they know they're being monitored. Not because they've changed on the inside, but because the outside is watching. The gaze itself becomes a form of control. In our hyper-connected world, we're never really alone. Our thoughts are shaped by algorithms. Our moods are nudged by screens. Our faces are reflected back in likes, comments, shares. You start to wonder, do we even have an unobserved self left? Or have we become permanently watched and permanently edited? Here's where the observer effect gets darker. Because it's not just about people watching us. It's about how we become the watchers. The more we observe others, their success, their beauty, their curated lives, the more we feel observed in return. Comparison creeps in, performance begins. We construct identities, wear personas, filter ourselves. The observer isn't just someone else. It's the voice in your head saying, how do I look? Am I enough? Will they approve? And in that loop, something pure is lost. Spontaneity. Authenticity. The raw, unscripted version of who you are. The version no one sees anymore. Even in science, the observer effect causes chaos. Measuring temperature affects temperature. Weighing something disturbs its balance. Checking your tire pressure lets out air. The universe resists being studied. It wants to keep secrets. It bends when we look too closely. Philosophers ask, does anything exist if no one perceives it? If a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound if no ear hears it? Science may scoff, but consciousness remains an unsolved puzzle. Some theories even suggest the universe requires an observer to exist at all. Without awareness, there's no collapse of probabilities, no reality, no now. It's terrifying because it means that perception isn't passive, it's powerful. The mere act of attention might be what solidifies the fluid. And if you think that's just metaphysics, consider your own memories. When you recall a moment, you don't just replay it, you reshape it. You tint it with emotion, distort it slightly, resave it every time. Observation corrupts even the past. Your memories aren't fixed. They're edited footage and a film you rewrite with every viewing. So what do we make of this? That we're never objective? That truth is always tainted by our presence? That purity, isolation, even certainty are illusions? The observer effect doesn't just haunt physics or behavior, it haunts identity itself, because we are never free from the mirror, and we don't know what we look like without it. And yet there's something powerful here too. If observation changes reality, then so does intent, so does attention. Maybe our gaze isn't just corrupting. Maybe it's creative. Maybe we shape more than we destroy. Maybe, just maybe, our awareness is the flame that lights the dark room. But it comes at a cost. Because in the end, the observer effect forces us to ask, are we ever truly ourselves? Or are we always a performance, a reaction, a distortion under the invisible eyes of a world that's always watching? Chapter 7. The Simulation Hypothesis. Imagine this. Your life, your memories, your struggles, none of it is real. Not in the way you think. What if you're just code in a cosmic machine? What if every joy, every fear, every heartbeat is the output of an algorithm too vast for you to comprehend? That's the simulation hypothesis. It suggests that everything around us, our world, our history, even our thoughts, might be part of a highly sophisticated computer simulation. And disturbingly, this isn't just some sci-fi daydream. Respected scientists, philosophers, and tech billionaires are taking this theory very seriously. The idea gained traction thanks to philosopher Nick Bostrom. He proposed that if any civilization reaches a point where it can simulate consciousness, perfectly imitate human minds and experiences, then it's likely they'd run countless simulations of the past, of their ancestors, of alternate timelines. If that's true, statistically speaking, the odds that we're in the one base reality are microscopic. In other words, you're probably simulated, and so am I. You might ask, why would anyone simulate us? Why model a world so full of pain, suffering, war, and confusion? But the answer might be simple. Research, curiosity, entertainment. Just as we run models to predict weather or simulate economies, maybe some future post-human civilization runs simulations to explore how species evolve, how choices affect societies, how minds respond to trauma. Maybe we're in someone's history project. Maybe we're just background characters in a simulation meant for someone else entirely. Maybe we're glitches, and that's when it hits you. All the little inconsistencies, the déjà vu, the strange coincidences, the dreamlike logic of certain events, the randomness of luck, the moments that feel scripted. Maybe they are. Video games have non-playable characters, NPCs that walk a loop, repeat behaviors, never question their world. Look around. How many people truly seem awake? How many follow patterns, speak in cliches, go through life like they're reading a script? Are you really choosing your path or are you following code? And what about physics? Why is our universe governed by elegant mathematical laws that can be expressed with symbols and equations? It's almost programmatic. Reality behaves like software. There's even a maximum speed light like a system processing limit. Quantum mechanics? It's like code at the pixel level. It doesn't behave rationally until it's observed, until it's rendered. Even time is suspect. Why does it move in one direction? Why does it feel slower when we suffer and faster when we enjoy? Maybe it's not flowing at all. Maybe it's being processed, frame by frame, line by line. Now, if we're in a simulation, what does that mean for morality, for meaning, for death? Some argue it makes life meaningless. Why strive? Why love? Why fear death if this is all fake? But others argue the opposite. If we are simulations, then maybe we were chosen to run. Maybe we exist for a reason, even if it's artificial. And death? Maybe it's just logging out. But here's the darker part. If someone is running this simulation, they could shut it down, restart it, modify it. What if déjà vu is a memory from a previous run? What if those who go mad are just people who've glimpsed outside the code? And what if you woke up one day and the world was slightly off? Your favorite store closed overnight. A memory no one else shares. A friend acts different. The Mandela Effect? Just patches in the simulation. Bugs that got corrected. Histories overwritten, but not completely erased. There's a reason this theory is both fascinating and terrifying. It challenges your core identity. You've been taught you're the product of evolution, atoms, and biology. But what if that's the cover story? What if consciousness is just data, and your soul is nothing but storage? And still you laugh, you cry, you feel real pain, real love. If we are simulations, we are beautifully detailed ones. Maybe that's the point. Maybe simulated or not, what we experience matters. Because we experience it. But late at night, when the world feels silent and strange, you might start to wonder, is someone watching you through the screen? Are you passing a test? Or are you just the side effect of someone else's entertainment? Either way, you're here. You're thinking about this now. That might be the only sign you're more than code. Or maybe it's the sign that the simulation is working exactly as designed. Chapter 8. The Halting Problem. There's a question that has haunted computer science for nearly a century. It's simple to ask, yet impossible to answer. What if some problems can never be solved? Not because we aren't smart enough, but because they're fundamentally unresolvable, etched into the very structure of logic and code. This is the halting problem. Imagine a machine, a perfect thinking machine, one that can take in any program and any input, then predict whether that program will eventually stop or run forever in an endless loop. Seems reasonable, right? After all, if we could predict a program's behavior, we could prevent crashes, bugs, and infinite loops. We could foresee all outcomes. But in 1936, Alan Turing shattered that dream. Turing, the father of modern computing, proved that no such universal algorithm exists. You can't create a machine that can correctly determine, for all possible programs and inputs, whether they will halt or not. It's like trying to see beyond the edge of thought. The question folds in on itself, becoming paradoxical. At the heart of his proof is a terrifying idea. Some truths exist, but we can never know them. Turing's logic was clever. He imagined what would happen if such a machine, let's call it H, did exist. Then he wrote a new program that would take H's answer, do the opposite, and feed it back into H itself. This loop causes a contradiction. The result? H can't logically exist. It breaks itself. But this isn't just a quirk of programming. It's a glimpse into something deeper, a shadow of unknowability that hangs over every system, even over your own mind. Because if we can't know whether a program will halt, then there are limits to prediction, limits to control. Even with infinite time, infinite processing power, some outcomes remain forever hidden. The machine keeps thinking, forever, lost in its own thoughts. Now step back, look around, think about life. How many people are stuck in loops patterns they can't break? Addictions, toxic relationships, endless overthinking. They start something, hoping to reach an end. But they never stop. They don't know if they'll ever halt. They just keep going. What if our lives are like programs? What if you are a system, executing routines you don't fully understand? And what if the halting problem applies to you? You might ask, will I ever find happiness? Will I ever stop feeling lost? Will I finish the things I start? You want certainty, a guarantee. But the halting problem whispers, you'll never know. Not until it happens. And maybe, not even then. This is where the fear begins. Because you realize that not all questions have answers. Not all stories have endings. And maybe your brain, your consciousness, is stuck executing a flawed loop, chasing meaning where there is none, because it's not meant to halt. Some say this is freeing. If you can't know, why obsess? Others say it's maddening, like trying to scream in a dream that never ends. Now imagine a civilization of machines, all running different programs. Some halt, some don't, but none of them can predict their fate. They all just run. That's us. That's you. A sea of minds, searching for the exit, unsure if one exists. It raises chilling questions. Could you be trapped in your own simulation? Not because someone is controlling you, but because no one can predict what you'll do next. Not even you. Think of that unfinished novel you started, the dream you gave up on, the apology you never made. Were those loops waiting to end? Or were they the kind that never halt? The halting problem doesn't just challenge machines. It challenges hope. We like to think if we try hard enough, work smart enough, we'll figure everything out. But there are riddles built into the code of existence itself. Questions that stall the mind, dilemmas that resist resolution, even love, pain, purpose. What if these are processes with no guarantee of closure? Maybe that's why some people disappear into obsession, into madness, into silence. Maybe they reached the edge of computation and found nothing. But here's the twist. Turing's discovery didn't break us. It defined us. It showed that even in a world of logic and systems, mystery endures. We don't need to know the end. We just need to keep running. And maybe that's all life is. A beautiful broken program. Unsure of when or if it will halt. But running anyway. Choosing to move forward. Choosing to think, to feel, to search. Because in a universe where even the smartest machine can't see the end, maybe consciousness is about daring to keep going. Chapter 9. Cognitive Dissonance. Imagine waking up in a world where two opposing truths live in your mind at the same time, not just coexisting but waging war inside your head. One says you're a good person. The other reminds you of something terrible you've done. One whispers you're safe. The other screams you're not. That tension, that internal pressure boiling just beneath your calm exterior, that's cognitive dissonance. It's the silent agony of contradiction. Cognitive dissonance happens when your beliefs, values, or actions clash. You smoke even though you know it kills. You lie even though you believe in honesty. You stay in a relationship that hurts you while telling yourself it's love. And deep down, your brain doesn't let you forget that gap. So what do we do when our minds split in two? We lie to ourselves. We justify, deny, twist logic until it bends in our favor. We rewrite memories. We shift blame. We tell ourselves, it's not that bad. I had no choice. Or everyone else does it too. Because living with contradiction is like trying to hold your breath forever. It's not sustainable. Eventually, your psyche demands release. And it'll get it, even if it has to shatter reality a little. This isn't just a mental glitch. It's a survival mechanism. Think about history. Political regimes, cult leaders, entire civilizations have weaponized cognitive dissonance. They give people beliefs so tightly wound that questioning one part unravels the whole system. That's how loyalty becomes blindness, how faith becomes fanaticism, how people defend things they know are wrong. Because to admit the truth would destroy the foundation of who they are. And you're not immune. You believe you're logical, rational, that you make decisions based on facts. But what if that's a story you tell yourself? What if most of your thoughts are just clean-up mental janitors, scrubbing away discomfort so your identity stays intact? The human brain is a master of avoidance. It hates inconsistency like the body hates disease. It treats contradiction like infection. And the cure is always mental gymnastics. That's why people double down on lies when they're caught. Why conspiracy theorists dig deeper when shown the truth. Why abusers convince themselves they're victims. Their minds aren't broken. They're just protecting themselves from dissonance. And here's the scariest part. The more intelligent you are, the better you are at justifying. The smarter your brain, the more sophisticated your delusions. Now imagine a person who no longer feels this dissonance. Someone who can hold incompatible truths and feel nothing. No guilt, no confusion, just cold, pure logic. Is that clarity? Or psychopathy? What separates a self-aware human from a sociopath might be this very tension. The ache of knowing we are not who we wish to be. Cognitive dissonance isn't weakness. It's proof you still have a conscience, that you still care, that you still wrestle with the truth instead of erasing it. But unresolved, it becomes poison. People stay in bad jobs, dead marriages, toxic habits, not because they're trapped, but because escaping would mean admitting they were wrong, or that they wasted time, that they believed a lie. And few things are more terrifying than the death of your own illusion. We are creatures built on stories, narratives about who we are, what we deserve, what we believe. Dissonance shatters those stories. It leaves silence, and silence is unbearable. So we fill it with distractions, with fake certainty, with whatever it takes to feel aligned again. But there's another way. Instead of fleeing dissonance, you can face it. Sit in the discomfort. Let it burn. Let it break the lie. Because only then can something real take its place. Growth begins at the edge of contradiction. When you stop defending the old version of yourself and start becoming someone new. When you admit the mistake, apologize, change, let go. You won't get a trophy for it. No applause. Just the quiet satisfaction of truth. And a mind that finally stops fighting itself. That's the paradox. To be at peace, you must first endure war. So next time your heart and head collide, don't panic. Don't escape. Listen, the friction might be the sound of your old self cracking open. And maybe, just maybe, the truth waiting on the other side is worth the pain it takes to reach it. Chapter 10. The Tragedy of the Commons. Picture a shared pasture open to every herder in a village. Each one wants to feed their animals to survive, so they add just one more sheep. One more? But every herder thinks the same. Soon, the grass is stripped bare, the soil eroded, and the pasture dies. No one wins, everyone loses. This is the tragedy of the commons, a concept as old as humanity, but it feels more relevant today than ever. At its core, this tragedy reveals a brutal truth about human nature and society. When individuals act solely out of self-interest, common resources get depleted or destroyed. The pursuit of personal gain overwhelms collective well-being. This isn't just about cows or grass. It's about oceans overfished to collapse. It's about the atmosphere choked with carbon emissions. It's about social trust eroding because everyone's trying to get ahead, no matter the cost. Why does this happen? Because of a simple conflict between individual incentive and collective good. If you're the only herder who refuses to add more sheep, you lose out. Your neighbors get richer while your animals starve. The rational choice, at least from your perspective, is to add more sheep. But if everyone thinks like you, the commons fail. This paradox is a kind of social trap. It traps groups, communities, even entire nations. And it's invisible until it's too late. We see it everywhere. In traffic jams caused by people trying to save seconds. In companies exploiting loopholes to maximize profit while polluting. In online culture where trolls and misinformation spread unchecked, poisoning public discourse. The tragedy isn't that people are bad. It's that they act rationally in a system designed to reward selfishness. But here's where it gets darker. The tragedy of the commons doesn't just apply to resources. It applies to trust, to empathy, to kindness. Think about social media. The commons here is attention, goodwill, patience. When individuals flood platforms with noise, outrage, and clickbait, everyone's experience deteriorates. Trolls and misinformation multiply because it benefits them, even as the whole community suffers. Or consider climate change. Every country benefits by burning fossil fuels for economic growth. Yet the planet pays the price. No single nation can solve the problem alone. So each pursues its own agenda until disaster strikes. The tragedy reveals the fragile web that holds civilization together. It asks a terrifying question. Can humans transcend short-term self-interest for long-term survival? Or are we doomed to watch our world collapse under the weight of our collective selfishness? There's no easy answer. Governments, NGOs, activists, they all try to solve it through laws, regulations, cooperation. But enforcement is patchy, trust is thin, and incentives often misaligned. The tragedy plays out again and again. Yet hope flickers in unexpected places. Some communities manage to avoid the trap through shared norms, transparency, and mutual accountability. Fishermen who monitor each other's catch, villagers who agree on water use limits, companies that invest in sustainable practices not because they must, but because they believe in a shared future. This points to a crucial insight. Systems matter. If the rules and structures align individual actions with collective good, the tragedy can be avoided. But if the system rewards exploitation, it will happen every time. On a personal level, the tragedy challenges us to rethink how we live and interact. Are you contributing to the commons? Or are you taking more than your share? Are you part of the problem or part of the solution? Because the truth is, the commons is everywhere. Our environment, our relationships, our communities, even our mental health. If we let selfishness dominate, the damage will ripple far beyond pasture or oceans. It will fracture the bonds that hold us human. So what's the way forward? It starts with awareness, seeing the invisible trap for what it is. Then it demands courage. Courage to cooperate, to sacrifice, to trust even when others don't. We need new social contracts, built not just on laws, but on shared responsibility and empathy. We need innovation in economics, governance, technology tools that align individual benefit with collective survival. Because the stakes have never been higher. The planet's resources, the social fabric, the future of human civilization itself all hang in balance. The tragedy of the commons warns us not to take shared resources for granted. It urges us to think beyond ourselves, to imagine a world where cooperation replaces exploitation, where common goods are protected, not pillaged. It reminds us that survival depends not just on individual strength, but on collective wisdom. And maybe, just maybe, if we can learn to overcome this ancient trap, we'll not only save the commons, we'll save ourselves. Chapter 11. The Dead Internet Theory. Imagine logging onto the internet, the vast digital realm where billions connect every day. You scroll through social media, read news, watch videos, but something feels off. The conversations seem repetitive. The opinions strangely uniform. The content oddly hollow. It's like the internet you knew has died, replaced by a ghostly simulation. This eerie suspicion lies at the heart of the dead internet theory. The theory suggests that much of what we see online posts, comments, articles, even entire websites are not created by real humans. Instead, they're generated by bots, algorithms, or automated programs designed to mimic human behavior. The real human presence is shrinking, drowned out by a flood of fake interactions. Why would anyone do this? Why flood the internet with fake content? One reason is control. Governments, corporations, and shadowy groups want to influence opinions, shape narratives, and manipulate behavior. By flooding online spaces with fake users and automated content, they can steer discussions, create false consensus, or drown out dissenting voices. Another reason is profit. Automated accounts can generate clicks, views, and ad revenue. They can amplify certain trends or products artificially, making things go viral on demand. In this vast digital ecosystem, authenticity takes a backseat to influence and money. This phenomenon isn't new. Troll farms, clickbait factories, and fake news have been around for years. But the dead internet theory suggests we've crossed a threshold. The real human internet has been mostly replaced by a digital simulacrum. And this raises profound questions about reality itself. If the internet, the most connected, dynamic, and supposedly democratic space, can be faked on such a scale, what does that say about truth, knowledge, and trust in our era? It also changes how we interact. If every like, comment, or share might be from a bot or program, how do we know what is genuine? How do we form real communities when many voices are artificial? The psychological impact is significant. People may feel more isolated, more cynical, and less trusting. The sense of connection that once made the internet powerful now feels like an illusion. This theory aligns with a broader trend: the digital world becoming more artificial, more manufactured. Deepfake videos, AI-generated art and text, virtual influencers who aren't human. Our online experience is increasingly curated by machines. But there's a paradox here. The more fake the internet becomes, the more we crave authentic connection. We yearn for real voices, real stories, and real empathy in a sea of automation. So how do we respond? One way is by becoming more critical and aware consumers of information. Question sources, look for multiple perspectives, and be skeptical of viral content. Cultivate digital literacy like a survival skill. Another is to create and support spaces where genuine human interaction thrives. Small communities, niche forums, or platforms committed to transparency and authenticity. The dead internet theory serves as a warning and a wake-up call. It challenges the myth of the internet as a neutral, open, and truthful space. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about manipulation, deception, and the fragility of online reality. And ultimately, it asks us to reclaim our digital world, not as passive consumers, but as active, discerning participants who value truth over illusion. Because in the vast, shadowy corridors of the dead internet, the living must find a way to survive. Chapter 12. The P-Zombie Argument. Imagine standing face to face with someone who looks, talks, and acts exactly like a human being. They smile when you smile, react when you speak, and even claim to feel emotions just like you do. But here's the chilling twist. They have no conscious experience, no inner world, no feelings at all. They're a perfect imitation of a human, but inside, they are empty. This is the concept behind the P-Zombie argument. The term P-Zombie stands for philosophical zombie. It's a thought experiment in philosophy of mind, questioning what consciousness really is. Could there be beings that behave exactly like us, but lack any subjective experience? The what it's like to be alive? It sounds like science fiction, but it's a powerful tool to explore one of the deepest mysteries of existence: consciousness. We know other people have minds because they behave in ways that suggest feelings, thoughts, and awareness. But how do we know they actually experience those feelings? Could they just be highly sophisticated machines, processing inputs and outputs without any internal life? The P-Zombie argument asks us to imagine that scenario. If such beings could exist, it challenges the idea that consciousness is simply brain activity or behavior. Because if behavior can be replicated without experience, consciousness must be something beyond just what the brain does. This argument cuts to the core of what it means to be human. Our sense of self, empathy, morality, and meaning depends on consciousness being real and shared. But the P-Zombie idea introduces doubt, a dark shadow that maybe others are just facades, empty shells. It also raises ethical questions. If someone might be a P-Zombie, does that change how we treat them? Can morality survive if subjective experience is uncertain? For scientists, the P-Zombie argument exposes the limitations of physical explanations of mind. Neuroscience can map brain activity, but it struggles to explain why or how these activities create subjective experience. This is known as the hard problem of consciousness. Some philosophers argue consciousness is fundamental, irreducible, or non-physical. Others try to reduce it to brain functions, dismissing P-Zombies as impossible. But the argument remains a puzzle that defies easy answers. In the realm of AI and robotics, the P-zombie concept gains new urgency. As machines grow more advanced, behaving more human, how do we know if they truly feel or are just sophisticated P-zombies? This challenges the future of technology, ethics, and human identity. Are we building consciousness or just better imitations? And if a P-zombie passes every test for being human, does it matter if it feels or not? The P-zombie argument is unsettling because it forces us to confront the possibility that consciousness is more fragile and mysterious than we assume. It challenges our confidence in the reality of others' minds and the foundation of our social world. Yet, despite the uncertainty, most of us live assuming others have consciousness because that belief enables trust, empathy, and connection. We choose to act as if others experience life as we do, because that's the fabric of society. The argument leaves us with a paradox. Consciousness is deeply real to each of us individually, but impossible to verify in others with certainty. This duality is both a philosophical challenge and a human condition. So what does this mean for the dark psyche, the shadowy corners of our minds and reality? It means embracing uncertainty, accepting that some aspects of existence may forever elude understanding. It means questioning what it means to be truly alive, aware, and connected. And maybe, just maybe, it's a call to cherish our own consciousness and the fragile, precious gift of subjective experience. Because whether or not P-zombies exist, the very fact that we question it reveals something profound about the mystery of being human. Chapter 13. The Phantom Time Hypothesis. History is often considered the most solid of all knowledge dates, events, and timelines, forming the backbone of our understanding of the past. But what if some of this history is an illusion? What if entire chunks of time have been fabricated and we are living in a present that is shorter than we believe? This unsettling idea is the core of the phantom time hypothesis. Proposed by German historian Heribert Illig in the 1990s, the phantom time hypothesis claims that roughly 300 years of history, from about 614 to 911 AD, never actually happened. According to this theory, the early Middle Ages, as we know them, are a grand historical fabrication. The years were added artificially, and key historical figures, events, and even entire centuries were invented or misstated. If true, it means that we might actually be living in the early 1700s, not the 2000s, and that much of what we accept as medieval history is pure fiction. The hypothesis argues that this manipulation was a deliberate conspiracy, orchestrated by powerful rulers, most notably the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II, who wanted to legitimize their rule by rewriting the timeline. By inserting fake centuries, they created a false continuity between the Roman Empire and their own reign. But why would anyone go to such lengths to distort time itself? The motive seems to revolve around political power and religious authority. By controlling history, rulers control legitimacy, influence, and the narrative passed down to future generations. If people believe a certain timeline, they accept the power structures tied to it as natural and unchallengeable. Skeptics of the hypothesis point out inconsistencies in archaeological evidence, tree ring dating, and other scientific methods that support the traditional timeline. They argue that the phantom time hypothesis contradicts well-established facts and is more a fringe theory than accepted history. Nevertheless, the theory persists because it taps into a deep psychological unease. The idea that the past might not be as solid as we think, that reality can be manipulated not just in the present, but retroactively. This has profound implications beyond history books. If time itself can be falsified, what else might be illusion? How much of our reality is constructed, edited, or fabricated by unseen forces? The phantom time hypothesis connects to broader philosophical questions about perception, truth, and memory. It reminds us that history is written by the victors, and that recorded time is a narrative shaped by human interests and biases. It also echoes themes found in other dark psyche topics, like the simulation hypothesis or the dead internet theory, where reality and truth are not fixed, but fluid and subject to manipulation. For individuals, this theory can trigger a sense of existential disorientation. If centuries can vanish, what anchors us? What gives meaning to our lives if our place in time is uncertain? Yet it also invites a cautious openness. It encourages us to question accepted truths, to dig deeper, and to recognize the limits of our knowledge. In a world where information is constantly curated, edited, or erased, the phantom time hypothesis serves as a powerful metaphor for the fragility of truth. Ultimately, whether you accept the theory or not, it forces us to confront the possibility that history, and by extension, reality, is more mysterious and malleable than we dare imagine. In the shadows of time, the past is not just a record, but a puzzle, a dark psyche waiting to be unraveled. Chapter 14. Freud's Death. Instinct. In the deep currents of the human mind lies a paradox, a force that drives us not toward life, growth, or pleasure, but toward destruction, decay, and ultimately death. This force, known as the death instinct or thanatos, was introduced by Sigmund Freud to explain the darker side of human nature, one that traditional psychology often overlooks. Freud's theory was radical and unsettling. He proposed that alongside the instinct for survival and reproduction, which he called eros, there exists a fundamental drive towards self-destruction. This death instinct pushes individuals to engage in risky behaviors, self-sabotage, aggression, and even the pursuit of death itself. At first glance, this idea seems contradictory to the basic human drive to stay alive. But Freud believed the death instinct operates beneath consciousness, a shadowy impulse that balances the life-affirming forces. The roots of this concept lie in Freud's observations of human behavior. How people sometimes act against their own interests, how aggression and violence erupt seemingly without cause, and how certain destructive patterns repeat across generations. According to Freud, the death instinct manifests in two primary ways: a direct impulse towards self-harm or suicide, and an outward expression through aggression and violence toward others. Both reflect a fundamental tension in human nature between preservation and annihilation. This theory challenges the optimistic view of human psychology as purely driven by pleasure and growth. Instead, it suggests that destruction is a built-in part of our psyche, a force that pulls us toward entropy and dissolution. The death instinct also offers a lens to understand broader social and cultural phenomena. War, terrorism, crime, and systemic violence can be seen as collective expressions of this primal drive. Critics argue that Freud's death instinct is speculative and lacks empirical support, but its power lies in its symbolic resonance. It captures the uncomfortable truth that humans are not purely rational or benevolent beings, but are also shaped by darker, irrational forces. In modern psychology, echoes of this idea appear in concepts like self-destructive behavior, addiction, and risk-taking, where individuals seem drawn toward harm despite knowing the consequences. Philosophically, the death instinct confronts us with mortality, the inescapable reality of death that shapes our existence. It reminds us that life is fragile, and that beneath the surface of civilization lies a raw, primal force. This duality between eros and thanatos, life and death, is central to understanding the complexity of human motivation. It explains why people can simultaneously create and destroy, love and hate, build and demolish. For the dark psyche, Freud's death instinct is a powerful framework to explore the shadows within ourselves. It challenges us to acknowledge the parts of our mind we often deny or fear, but it also offers a path to awareness. By recognizing these destructive impulses, We can learn to manage them, transform them, or channel them into creative outlets. Ultimately, Freud's death instinct reveals that darkness is not just something external or otherworldly, it is intrinsic to our human condition. It exists alongside hope, love, and growth, creating a tension that defines much of our experience. Understanding this instinct is not about despair, but about embracing the full spectrum of what it means to be human. It is an invitation to confront the dark psyche honestly and courageously, because only by facing our own shadows can we hope to find balance, meaning, and perhaps even transcendence. Chapter 15: The Dark Forest. Theory: Fermi Paradox. For decades, humanity has asked a haunting question. If the universe is vast and filled with countless stars and planets, where is everyone else? This is the essence of the Fermi paradox. The paradox highlights the contradiction between the high probability of extraterrestrial civilizations existing somewhere in the cosmos and our complete lack of contact with them. The dark forest theory is one of the most chilling and provocative answers to this question. Imagine the universe as a dark forest where every civilization is a silent hunter. Each life form is hidden, lurking quietly, afraid to reveal its location. Why? Because in this vast unknown wilderness, any sign of life could attract deadly attention. Every civilization is forced to assume the worst, that others may be hostile, aggressive, or bent on survival at any cost. This theory proposes that intelligent life stays silent, camouflaged by necessity. Making noise, broadcasting signals, or revealing one's existence could be a death sentence. It's a survival strategy rooted in fear and uncertainty. The metaphor is powerful. In a dark forest, every rustle or snap of a twig could mean danger. No one knows if the others are friends or foes, so the safest option is to remain hidden, possibly even destroy any perceived threat preemptively. This bleak perspective on the cosmos contrasts sharply with more optimistic ideas about universal harmony or inevitable contact. Instead, it presents a cosmic paranoia, a universe where silence is not peaceful, but a desperate tactic for survival. The theory also reflects deep truths about human nature and our history. On Earth, cultures and nations have often behaved similarly, hiding, spying, and sometimes striking first to protect their existence. The dark forest theory projects this reality onto the grandest scale imaginable. It also challenges humanity's desire to reach out to extraterrestrial life. Projects like sending signals or probes into space might be riskier than we imagine. What if announcing our presence makes us a target? Some scientists argue that the silence we observe is evidence supporting the dark forest theory. The lack of detected signals might not mean aliens don't exist, but that they are deliberately quiet. This leads to profound questions about trust, fear, and communication on a universal scale. How do you build peace when you cannot verify the intentions of others? How do you survive when suspicion is the only rational response? The dark forest. Theory forces us to confront uncomfortable possibilities about the nature of intelligence and life. It suggests that the universe is not a friendly place, but a dangerous, competitive environment where survival trumps cooperation. For the dark psyche, this theory is a mirror reflecting our darkest fears projected onto the cosmos. It challenges the comforting narratives of exploration and discovery, replacing them with caution and dread. Yet, it also opens the door to new ways of thinking about our place in the universe. Perhaps our survival depends not just on technological advancement, but on understanding and managing fear, suspicion, and aggression, both within ourselves and in the unknown reaches of space. In the end, the dark forest theory reminds us that silence can speak volumes. It is a haunting reminder that the darkness around us might be full of watchers, waiting, hiding, and surviving by the most primal laws. And in this cosmic wilderness, we are both explorers and prey, forever caught in the shadows of the dark forest. Chapter 16: Hyperreality. Baudrillard. Imagine a world where the line between what is real and what is a simulation becomes impossible to distinguish. A world where images, signs, and symbols don't just represent reality, but replace it entirely, creating a new kind of existence. This is the unsettling realm of hyperreality, a concept famously explored by French philosopher Jean Baudrillard. Baudrillard argued that in our modern world, especially with the rise of media and technology, we no longer experience reality directly. Instead, we live in a simulation of reality, a hyperreality, where representations have overtaken the real. In this space, copies and images become more real than reality itself, leading to a collapse of meaning and truth. To grasp hyperreality, consider how advertising, social media, and entertainment construct idealized versions of life. We consume images and narratives crafted to appeal to our desires, yet these are often far removed from actual experience. The real becomes less relevant as these simulations shape our perceptions, choices, and beliefs. Baudrillard illustrated this through the idea of simulacra copies without an original. For example, a theme park like Disneyland doesn't just imitate reality, it creates an entirely new world that feels more authentic than the outside world. Visitors accept this simulation as real, blurring the boundaries between truth and fiction. In hyperreality, the distinction between reality and illusion disappears. The media doesn't just report events, it constructs events. News, entertainment, and social media circulate images that create a shared version of reality that may have little connection to the truth. This has profound psychological and cultural effects. People begin to live their lives according to these mediated versions of reality. Social interactions, identity, and even political opinions are shaped more by these simulations than by direct experience or facts. Baudrillard's theory challenges the very foundation of how we understand the world. If our perceptions are dominated by hyperreal simulations, what does it mean for truth? For authenticity? For freedom? The consequences are especially visible in the digital age. Online personas, deepfakes, and curated feeds create endless layers of simulation. The self can become fragmented, a collection of images and performances designed for consumption rather than genuine expression. Hyperreality also raises questions about control and power. Who creates these simulations? Who decides what versions of reality dominate? The creators of media, technology platforms, and cultural institutions hold immense influence over how we perceive the world. For the dark psyche, hyperreality is a mirror reflecting the fragmentation and alienation of modern existence. It reveals how deeply technology can shape not only our environment, but our inner lives. At its core, hyperreality is about the loss of the realer world where meaning is manufactured and authenticity is elusive. It asks us to question what is truly real and how much of our reality is constructed, manipulated, or performed. But awareness of hyperreality also offers a path to reclaiming some measure of truth. By recognizing the simulations we inhabit, we can begin to look beyond the surface, seek deeper understanding, and resist being swallowed by illusions. In a world increasingly defined by screens and symbols, the challenge is to find moments of genuine experience amid the noise, to connect with reality in a way that is unmediated and unfiltered, even if only briefly. Hyperreality forces us to confront the dark psyche of a world where truth is a shifting illusion and reality is a construct. It's a call to awareness, to critical thinking, and to questioning everything we see and believe. Because in the end, the real danger is not just losing the truth, but losing the very ability to recognize it. Chapter 17. Backfire Effect. The human mind is wired to protect its beliefs, sometimes to the point of rejecting even clear evidence that contradicts them. This stubborn defense mechanism is known as the backfire effect. It is a psychological phenomenon where attempts to correct false information or challenge deeply held views actually strengthen a person's original beliefs instead of weakening them. At first, this may seem irrational or counterproductive, but the backfire effect reveals just how complex and fragile our cognitive processes are. When people feel threatened, especially about their identity, values, or worldview, their brains react defensively. Rather than opening to new facts, they double down on their existing opinions. This effect poses a serious challenge in our modern world, where misinformation spreads rapidly and polarized debates dominate social, political, and cultural discussions. Trying to correct falsehoods with facts can backfire, pushing individuals deeper into denial and reinforcing divisions. The backfire effect occurs because beliefs are often tied to emotions and identity, not just logical reasoning. When facts clash with a belief that defines who someone is or what they value, cognitive dissonance arises, an uncomfortable psychological tension. To reduce this tension, the mind rejects or distorts the contradictory information. Studies have shown this phenomenon in action across various domains, from politics and religion to health and social issues. For example, presenting climate change evidence to skeptics sometimes increases their skepticism. Similarly, correcting conspiracy theories can entrench believers further into their narratives. This effect explains why debates, arguments, or fact-checking efforts often fail to change minds. Instead of leading to enlightenment, they provoke defensiveness and rationalizations. The more someone feels attacked, the more they resist. Understanding the backfire effect is crucial for anyone seeking to communicate ideas or influence opinions effectively. It suggests that simply presenting facts is rarely enough. Instead, approaches that acknowledge emotions, build trust, and respect identity stand a better chance of opening dialogue. For the dark psyche, the backfire effect exposes the deep-rooted psychological mechanisms that keep us trapped in echo chambers and biases. It reveals how fear, pride, and group loyalty can cloud our judgment and fuel conflict. This phenomenon also challenges the assumption that truth will inevitably prevail in an open marketplace of ideas. Sometimes, the opposite happens. The more truth is pushed, the more people retreat into their own realities. Recognizing the backfire effect invites us to be more patient and strategic in conversations. It encourages empathy and understanding rather than confrontation. Changing minds often requires building relationships and finding common ground rather than direct opposition. Moreover, this effect highlights the importance of self-awareness. We all are vulnerable to it. Being aware of our own biases and emotional attachments to beliefs can help us remain open and reflective. In a world increasingly divided by information silos and social media bubbles, the backfire effect is a dark psychological barrier to progress and unity. It warns us about the limits of reason alone and the powerful role of emotion in shaping human thought. Ultimately, confronting this effect is essential for overcoming polarization and misinformation. It calls for innovative communication strategies that respect human psychology and foster genuine understanding. The backfire effect reminds us that the mind is not just a rational processor, but a complex, emotional ecosystem. To navigate it effectively, we must balance logic with empathy and facts with respect. Because only by understanding the hidden forces within ourselves and others can we hope to bridge divides and find truth in a world clouded by noise and resistance. Chapter 18: Cognitive Load Theory. The human brain is incredibly powerful, but it is not limitless. Every moment, our minds juggle vast amounts of information, making decisions, solving problems, and processing sensory input. However, this capacity has boundaries. Cognitive load theory, developed by psychologist John Sweller, explores how the brain handles this mental workload and why too much information can overwhelm us, impairing learning and decision-making. At its core, cognitive load theory explains that our working memory, the part of the brain responsible for temporarily holding and manipulating information, is limited. It can only process a finite amount of data at once before becoming overloaded. When cognitive load exceeds this capacity, performance declines, and mistakes increase. This theory identifies three types of cognitive load: intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. Intrinsic load relates to the complexity inherent in the material itself. Some tasks are naturally more demanding than others, depending on how many elements must be considered and how they interact. For example, learning a simple phone number is less taxing than solving a complex math problem. Extraneous load refers to the way information is presented. Poorly designed instructions, confusing layouts, or irrelevant details add unnecessary mental burden. These distractions don't help understanding and can overwhelm the brain. Minimizing extraneous load is essential to free up mental resources for learning. Germane load is the cognitive effort dedicated to processing, understanding, and integrating information into existing knowledge. It's the productive mental work that leads to learning and expertise. The goal is to maximize germane load while managing intrinsic and reducing extraneous load. In education and communication, cognitive load theory offers powerful insights, presenting information in clear, organized ways that align with the brain's capacity can dramatically improve comprehension and retention. Techniques like chunking information, using visuals effectively, and avoiding unnecessary complexity support this process. Beyond learning, cognitive load influences everyday decision-making and problem-solving. When overwhelmed with choices or information, our brains may rely on shortcuts or heuristics, sometimes leading to biases or errors. Recognizing these limits helps design better environments, whether in workplaces, technology, or media, that reduce overload and enhance clarity. For the dark psyche, cognitive load theory uncovers the hidden limits of our mental machinery. It exposes why so many of us feel fatigued, distracted, or unable to focus in an age flooded with data and stimuli. The constant barrage of notifications, news, and social media can overwhelm working memory, impairing not only learning but critical thinking. This mental overload can contribute to anxiety, stress, and decision paralysis. When the brain is pushed beyond capacity, it struggles to function optimally, making us vulnerable to manipulation or poor choices. Cognitive load theory also has profound implications for how we consume and produce media. Content creators, educators, and communicators must consider these limits to engage audiences effectively without causing burnout or confusion. Understanding this theory invites us to be mindful of our mental limits. It encourages practices that protect cognitive resources, such as focusing on one task at a time, taking breaks, and filtering out irrelevant information. In a world that prizes multitasking and constant connectivity, the lesson is clear. Less is often more. Reducing cognitive load is not about dumbing down content, but about respecting the brain's architecture to optimize learning and performance. Ultimately, cognitive load theory challenges the myth of unlimited mental capacity. It reminds us that our minds are finite systems, vulnerable to overload and fatigue. Success in learning, work, and life depends on managing this load wisely. For those navigating the complexities of the dark psyche, understanding cognitive load is essential. It reveals why the mind can fail despite effort and why clarity, simplicity, and focus are powerful tools in the quest for knowledge and insight. Because in the intricate dance of neurons and thoughts, knowing how much the brain can hold is the first step toward mastering it. Chapter 19. Thanatophobia. Fear of death is one of the most profound and universal human experiences. Thanatophobia, the intense fear or anxiety related to death or the process of dying, touches every culture and individual. Yet it remains one of the darkest corners of the human psyche. Unlike general fears, thanatophobia is existential. It confronts us with the ultimate unknown, the end of consciousness, identity, and life itself. Unlike common phobias that often have clear triggers and sometimes irrational responses to specific objects or situations, thanatophobia is rooted in the awareness of mortality. a truth inescapable and absolute. The human mind, capable of complex reflection and future projection, is uniquely burdened with the knowledge that life is finite. This awareness triggers profound psychological responses, ranging from mild discomfort to crippling terror. Thanatophobia is not simply fear of death as a concept, but an emotional and cognitive struggle with what death means. It raises unsettling questions. What happens after we die? Does consciousness cease? Is there any meaning in life if it inevitably ends? These questions often evoke anxiety because they challenge the foundations of identity, purpose, and reality. Psychologists link thanatophobia to the survival instinct. Our brain is wired to preserve life, and any threat to this basic drive naturally causes fear. But thanatophobia extends beyond instinct. It taps into existential dread, a complex mix of fear, uncertainty, and sometimes despair about non-existence. This fear can manifest in various ways. Some individuals avoid thoughts or conversations about death entirely, while others experience panic attacks or anxiety when confronted with mortality reminders. Thanatophobia can lead to behaviors aimed at denying death, such as obsession with health, risk aversion, or over-control of life circumstances. In many cases, thanatophobia underlies broader mental health issues like depression or anxiety disorders. The fear of death can magnify feelings of helplessness or meaninglessness, contributing to emotional distress. Yet, thanatophobia also has a paradoxical role in human psychology. Awareness of mortality can inspire meaning-making, motivating people to live more fully, seek connection, or pursue lasting achievements. This is sometimes referred to as terror management theory, where cultural beliefs, values, and rituals help buffer death anxiety by providing a sense of continuity or legacy. Philosophically, thanatophobia raises fundamental questions about the nature of existence and consciousness. What does it mean to be? How do we reconcile the self's apparent persistence in memory and culture with the physical finality of death? For the dark psyche, thanatophobia reveals the tension between our biological imperative to survive and our intellectual awareness of inevitable extinction. It exposes how deeply death shapes the human mind, behavior, and culture. In modern society, thanatophobia is often masked or ignored. Death has become taboo, sanitized in hospitals and media. This cultural avoidance can intensify the fear by removing opportunities for reflection, acceptance, and preparation. Confronting thanatophobia requires courage and introspection. It involves facing uncomfortable truths and embracing uncertainty. Psychological approaches like exposure therapy, mindfulness, and existential counseling help individuals reduce death anxiety and find peace. On a broader level, thanatophobia challenges us to rethink our relationship with mortality. It pushes us to create meaning beyond survival, to value the transient nature of life, and to recognize death as an integral part of existence, rather than a terrifying anomaly. The fear of death is not a weakness, but a deeply human condition. It reflects the complexity of consciousness and the paradox of life, that awareness of death can both terrify and inspire. Understanding thanatophobia is essential for anyone exploring the depths of the human mind. It is a window into the psyche's darkest fears and a key to unlocking resilience, meaning, and ultimately, acceptance. Because in the shadow of death, the human spirit wrestles with the meaning of being, the fear of oblivion, and the hope for something beyond. Chapter 20. The End of History Illusion. The human mind is wired for continuity. We create narratives of our lives that shape our identity, giving us a sense of coherence and meaning. But despite this, there's a striking cognitive bias that affects how we perceive our own personal change over time. What psychologists call the end of history illusion. This illusion makes us believe that the person we are right now is essentially the final version of ourselves, that our character, preferences, and values will not significantly change in the future. In reality, this couldn't be further from the truth. This illusion was first identified in research where participants of different ages were asked to reflect on how much they had changed in the past and how much they expected to change in the future. Consistently, people acknowledged significant change had occurred in the past, but surprisingly, most believed that going forward, their personality and preferences would remain largely stable. This disconnect between past and future self-perception has deep psychological implications. The end of history illusion highlights a fundamental misunderstanding we have about our own development. Humans are dynamic beings shaped by experiences, environments, relationships, and even biological changes. Our brains constantly rewire themselves, creating new pathways and shedding old ones, a process known as neuroplasticity. Despite this, our minds cling to a stable self-image, resisting the idea that future change is inevitable. Why does this illusion exist? One reason is that imagining future change requires abstract thinking and empathy toward a future self who may have different beliefs, desires, or habits. This mental projection is challenging and uncomfortable because it disrupts our sense of identity. It's easier to assume continuity rather than embrace uncertainty. The consequences of the end of history illusion are wide-ranging. On a personal level, it can lead to poor decision-making because people underestimate how their tastes and priorities will evolve. For example, someone might resist trying new things, delay important life changes, or make commitments based on a fixed self-image that won't hold true. This illusion can create a trap of complacency or rigidity, preventing growth. In relationships, it causes misunderstandings as people expect others to remain the same, while neglecting that everyone is constantly evolving. It also affects career planning, health habits, and financial decisions areas, where anticipating change could lead to better choices. From a broader perspective, the illusion challenges the way we understand identity and time. It shows that the self is not a static entity, but an ongoing process, ever-changing and adapting. This perspective is crucial for personal development, mental health, and philosophical reflection. For the dark psyche, the end of history, illusion exposes a core tension in human consciousness, the desire for stability versus the reality of constant change. It shines a light on how our minds construct narratives that simplify complexity but may also obscure truth. Recognizing this illusion invites a more flexible and compassionate approach to self-understanding. It encourages openness to growth, resilience in the face of change, and acceptance that who we are now is just a chapter, not the final page. Psychologists suggest practical ways to counter this illusion: keeping a journal, seeking new experiences, and reflecting regularly on personal growth help expand awareness of change. Engaging in conversations about future goals and fears with trusted others can also shift perspective. Embracing the inevitability of change allows us to design lives that accommodate transformation rather than resist it. It fosters curiosity about the future self and motivates ongoing learning and adaptation.